I think you should not start the broadcast.
It's okay. We just be on mute right now. If you could just stop sharing the screen.
Yeah, just stop sharing. Anjan, just say not now for the broadcast, please.
Giridhar,
Yeah, yeah, Mona Lisa.
we'll just be on mute for a while.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. We'll be starting the webinar at 11 a.m. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. We shall wait for a couple of minutes for other participants to join in. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Mona Lisa Bhagat, and I'm a manager at RiskPro India. I would like to give you a brief overview of RiskPro India Ventures Private Limited. RiskPro India is a risk management and consulting firm, and we are in this business for more than 10 years, serving more than 525 clients. We have our main head office in Mumbai, and our presence is in 7 other cities. We have our main business verticals: risk advisory, IT advisory, trainings, technology, and recruitment. Sorry. In risk advisory, we help our clients with internal audits, internal financial controls, SOPs, branch audits, ERM and risk assessments, and many others. In IT advisory, we assist in GDPR compliance, SSAE 18 SOC audits, PDP reviews, HIPAA, 21 CFR Part 11, and many other services. In trainings, we provide classroom and online trainings in enterprise risk management, risk assessment and mitigation, anti-bribery and corruption, anti-money laundering, among many others. In technology, we have our in-house software of third-party risk management, and with our other technology partners, we provide softwares like internal audit, risk management, legal compliance, whistleblowing, etc. In recruitment, we provide full-time and part-time risk and audit professionals and virtual risk managers. Today's webinar is for 60 minutes, and out of which 10 minutes will be for question and answer session. During the webinar, all the participants will be on mute mode, that is listen only mode. If any participant would like to ask any questions, I would request them to write it in the questions tab. In case any participant is facing any issue like not able to hear the speaker or not able to view the presentation, would request them to write in the questions tab, and we shall look into the same. The speaker for today's webinar are from Prismo Systems. We have Mr. Anjan Venkataramani, who is the founder and CEO, and Mr. Giridhar Janardana, who is the director. I would now like to hand it over to Mr. Giridhar. Mr. Giridhar, you are on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Mona Lisa. Thanks for the brief introduction. So without much ado, I would like to quickly, take you to the topic of today: implementing zero trust, a model for effective cybersecurity, presented by Anjan Venkatramani, the founder and CEO of Prismo. Let me just quickly take you 2 minutes to kind of give an introduction about Anjan and about Prismo, and then we'll jump into the hot topic of today on zero trust. So Anjan comes from a tech background. He did his studies with NIT in Surathkal, and then he went down to US to do his MS, and he's a Stanford grad. He has about 25 years of experience in high tech, holds about 50 plus patents in multiple domains. He was the senior vice president and general manager data center for the business unit of data center at Juniper. He also was instrumental in building supercomputers at Siemens. Also, he built out large-scale networks at Juniper. And now Anjan is on the goal of building a zero trust platform to make security simple and make it less complex for various organizations at Prismo. So just to give a 2-minute background on Prismo, Prismo is in production since 2019. They are headquartered in the Bay Area, California, and founded, as I said, by Anjan Venkatramani. They are funded by Sequoia, and there's a 40-member team spread across US, UK, and India. And this is more about professionals coming with a deep research, knowledge and background. And that's it, from Prismo and Anjan side. And probably I would like now to hand over it to Anjan to take us through zero trust as a concept, as an approach or methodology. Anjan, welcome for this webinar.
Hi, everyone. Good morning to everyone in India. As you can see, it's pretty late here, but we're happy to be here and happy to share our work on the Zero Trust platform here at Prismo.
Hey, thanks, Anjan. Anjan, it's pretty late out there, and thanks for making it for the webinar. I would like to first get into some basic fundamentals of zero trust. And today's agenda covers multiple aspects. As you would have seen, we have put up a topic as implementing zero trust, because we have heard enough about zero trust, and many organizations are in their knowledge mode or the strategy mode or the planning mode in implementing zero trust. And it will be really useful if you could drive us through the entire zero trust journey, starting from the basics around what is zero trust. I mean, is it an approach, a methodology, or are we still speaking about some security fundamentals here? And it would be helpful if you can first start with that, and then we'll move to the other topics in the agenda.
Sure, happy to do that, Gary. But before we do that, let me take you through the transformation that is happening in the enterprise. In the early 2000s, enterprise employees were in campuses. There were a few people who worked remotely and connected through VPN, but you had the enterprise employees in campuses, and you typically had your servers in server rooms that were as part of the campus itself. There was a local area network that users used to connect to applications and data in their data centers. But towards the end of 2010, the data center consolidation started, where resources from server rooms started moving into private consolidated data centers, and the cloud started getting built out. This was both the private cloud for very large enterprises. The Fortune 3000s built out their own data centers, and then there was also the emergence of Amazon, Azure, Google, the large cloud providers. And there's generally a migration from in-house data centers to cloud data centers, and to along with that, there was also a proliferation of SaaS applications. And Giri, you can move on to the next build. Yeah. So that was really the transformation that started in early 2010. On one side of it, you could see that the migration of servers to the cloud, a similar transformation also started happening where users were connecting from and how they connected into the enterprise and to their applications. Users were typically provided with devices from the enterprise. Towards 2010, with the iPhone, there was another smart devices. There was an increased proliferation of BYOD devices. Enterprise employees started bringing these devices onto the campus, working remotely, working from anywhere. And there was also increasing reliance on contractors, temporary workers, as well as third parties and suppliers. So they all became part of the enterprise, and the enterprise essentially got fragmented. So what started out as a perimeter-based security, the enterprise just completely defragmented, and it's completely perimeter-less today. And this trend is accelerating, and some of the horrific events that have happened over the last 2 years have actually accelerated this trend of employees and users connecting from all over, connecting into the enterprise and applications. So what happened as a result of this was traditional security was static, was network focused, was location focused. And once the user was inside this perimeter, they were trusted, and they were pretty much given access to almost anything, much more than what they needed access to. Now, sophisticated attacks as the enterprise fragmented and became a borderless enterprise, it became very easy. Once the enterprise perimeter was porous, threats can come in through any part of the enterprise, which was now distributed worldwide, and then could spread laterally to reach the critical systems to target enterprise critical assets. So this has really been the transformation in the enterprise architecture that has happened over the last 15, 20 years, which really sets the foundation for zero trust. So with that background, Giri, maybe we can go on to the next slide, which talks about what is zero trust. So zero trust and is it's really a paradigm or a philosophy, and it's a set of guiding principles. The simple principle around that is, as you go towards this borderless enterprise, which does not have a concept of location, does not have a perimeter, every single entity in the enterprise is untrusted. And an entity is a user, it can be a device, it can be an application. So there is a requirement that implicit trust is replaced with trust that is calculated dynamically, and that allows just in time, just enough access to enterprise resources. So zero trust is essentially an architecture and a paradigm. And as we build the slide out, we'll show you that this now zero trust in the last couple of years has become the de facto, is becoming really the new standard. The word zero trust was coined by Forrester, by John Kinderwag in 2009. But as in the last 2 years, this trend towards zero trust has accelerated. In late second half of 2020, NIST itself came out with a publication, NIST 800-207, which laid out the foundation for what zero trust is, and we'll go into that. Similarly, there's a zero trust started by Forrester. There's also Gartner, which has an architecture called Carta, and zero trust is the first step towards achieving Carta. So if you look at the figure on the right, the focus in a perimeter-based security was around attack protection. But now the emphasis has shifted to access protection, which is the inner circle. So there is policies which are preventive, that are continuously computed based on risk and then enforced in real time. So enforcement, prevention and enforcement is an integral part of zero trust. There's also, in the last 10 years, there has been enterprises have invested in detection and response, and that is flipping more towards prevention and enforcement, very much like the firewalls in the early 2000s. So there's a continuous validation of authentication of entities that are required, irrespective of where they are located, and that access control is continuous, dynamic, and risk-based. With this kind of an approach, you can have very good visibility, end-to-end visibility, and then protection against the most advanced threats of today. So that's really what is zero trust, which is replacing a location-based, perimeter-based security architecture into one where there is a perimeter. Think of a micro perimeter around every single entity. There's a perimeter around every single user. There's a perimeter around an application. There's a perimeter around devices. And that's really how you should think about zero trust. And the second thing is that authentication and authorization are not one time, they are continuous.
Hey, Anjan, thanks a lot for putting that, philosophy together and explaining us it in detail. I would like to quote, from Gregory, the Chief of Cybersecurity Policy and Strategy over at NSA. He posted this on LinkedIn. Although I'm not a very big fan of the term zero trust, but at the same time, Gregory knows we shouldn't ignore those principles, such as focusing on security basics, on comprehensive monitoring, granular access control, security automation, and least privilege. I think these are fundamental things that you explained, and which are very fundamental to zero trust. Although it is a marketing lingo that has been used for over now 10 years, but more and more organizations are adopting it, and people are giving more ears and implementing such solutions in the context of what is happening today with the cyber security world. So let me just ask Mona Lisa to bring up the poll question now on zero trust. Thank you, Mona Lisa.
I will be closing the poll now. I have shared the poll.
Okay, great. So the poll question was around, are you actively pursuing zero trust in your organization? And the poll result shows almost like 50% saying yes. Anjan, this shows that there's a lot of traction around zero trust, right? So there's a lot of momentum gaining now with day in, day out. We hear, since the COVID, since last March of 2020, we have seen more than 850 attacks, across the world. And India is on the top of the list as well on these attacks. And it's very critical and important stage that we have this topic on zero trust. Thank you for that. And now my question to you, Anjan, is, as we see that, organizations are pursuing zero trust, and as we speak about why zero trust, why now, is a fundamental question. Can you just elaborate it a bit on why now? Because as you explained, perimeters are, no more a thing to talk about security. We are going to the cloud, and it's becoming very important for organizations to look at zero trust in a different way. So could you please explain what more we can understand from why now and why zero trust?
Yeah, I mean, the simple, while there's been, as we work with enterprises here, zero trust is a philosophy. Enterprises are struggling with how do we get on the zero trust roadmap. But there is, I think there is, it's inevitable. Just look at what, I don't know if people in India have followed the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack that just happened a couple of weeks ago here. It disrupted the oil pipeline, the supply. The enterprise paid close to $5 million. There is reputation risk, legal risk, supply chain risk, operational risk, all of that that comes from an attack such as that. So clearly, it's this architecture enterprises will move aggressively towards this architecture going forward. So we've talked about the borderless enterprise. And if you just think about it, your compute in Amazon is sitting right next to a compute for a VM from our compute resource from another enterprise. It's not necessarily yours. You're sharing the infrastructure. You're sharing the hypervisor. Clearly, you need this as enterprises adopt digital transformation, migration to the cloud. Every single VM and every single container in the cloud has to be treated as untrusted. And you can't put a perimeter around it. Similarly, you're now working from home, which is now the new normal, or working from anywhere, and you're connecting remotely into the enterprise. So you need to put a boundary around every single, you need to put a perimeter around every single user, a contractor, partner who connects into the enterprise. It's not just connection through the network. Partners come in through APIs. Look at the supply chain attack, the SolarWinds attack that happened in towards the end of last year. The attack came from within your enterprise. So even the software that resides in your enterprise cannot be trusted anymore. The attacks are not necessarily coming from outside. They're coming from inside. They're coming from your insider threat. They're coming from your software supply chain. So clearly, nothing can be trusted anymore. So those are just a few simple examples of why now there is mass movement towards adoption of an architecture that is a continuous evaluation and authentication and authorization. And then finally, there is if you look at even the standardization attempts, zero trust is moving into the standards body. NIST 800-207 takes takes an approach towards standardization. The U.S. Department of Defense came out with a requirement around CMMC, which requires the suppliers or the manufacturers to be responsible for the entire supply chain, all the way back to who they are procuring their components from and software from. The U.S. president came out with an executive order. All of this will push the transformation and adoption of a zero trust architecture, and it'll accelerate that trend.
Hey, thanks, Anjan, for that. So I would just now move to the next slide on what is the architecture the audience should know about. There's a NIST Zero Trust 800-207 that has come out in sometime around August 2020. So could you please explain this in detail so that we understand exactly how a zero trust architecture should look like?
Yeah, so as we've been talking about in the concept of zero trust, every entity is untrusted. There is no concept of location. There's no concept of perimeter. So there are two core. So if we break down this image here, this is from the NIST publication, the top part and the bottom. The bottom part shows you the policy enforcement plane, which we think of as the data plane. So there are subjects or assets, entities connecting to resources on the other end. So a subject can be a user, it can be a device, it can be an application, it can be as granular as a script. Anything that can initiate an activity is a subject. They now try to connect to resources on the other side. The resources can be in your private data centers, it can be in public cloud, it can be in SaaS applications. So the data plane is the enforcement plane in the zero trust architecture. It's called as the policy enforcement point. On top is the control plane. And the control plane is called as the policy decision point. That's where the policy is computed dynamically. It's not a one-time policy. It's a policy that is the control plane takes in various kinds of information to compute that risk-based policy in real time to allow just in time, just enough privileges. So those are the main parts of this architecture, which is the separation between the policy decision point, the policy enforcement point. The policy enforcement point allows any to any, user to application, device to device, user to data, API to applications. So it is an any to any connectivity enforcement between subjects and resources. The control plane is dynamic. There's a feedback loop. You can see there's a bidirectional connectivity from the data plane to the control plane. It continuously gathers telemetry information from the data plane. Where is the user coming from? What is the location of the device? What is the posture of the device? The time? What is the accumulated risk score of the entity? And then it makes a decision: should I allow the user to connect to the resource or not? That decision is made in real time and through the policy administration pushed down to the data plane for enforcement. So that's really the summary of the architecture.
So Anjan, is it right to say there's a huge thrust on context in this whole architecture? So contextual information is gaining a lot of importance within zero trust?
Absolutely. Context is everything, right? And the context is where is the user coming from? Is he coming from VPN? Is he coming on site? Is this a partner? What is the role of the user in the enterprise? What is his device been patched or not patched? What else has the user done over the last day, over the last 3 months? So all of this context is used by the control plane to authenticate and authorize the user's request to connect to an enterprise resource.
So Anjan, as a fallout of this conversation, I would like to understand, you have seen a lot of organizations, you have spoken to multiple customers and clients across the globe. What are the fallacies in the current architecture? You see that not many organizations have adopted zero trust yet. They are in the path towards adopting zero trust, and they are in that journey of doing one bit at a time. So what are some of the things that you think is the fallacies of the current architecture, and where do you think is the problem lies? I mean, they don't have the context information. Many of them don't have context information, right? I mean, so what are the core problems today in this architecture that customers are, it's a siloed problem. It's a silo is the problem. There are multiple tool solutions. As you know, Fortune 1000 companies have more than 75 tools for security, right? So what is exactly the problem there?
Yeah, so finally you're trying to say which subject can access, which can they access the resource that they want, that they're requesting access to, right? That's really the decision that is being made. Now, just think about this, right? An enterprises are large, they're distributed, they're organized in different domains. They are organized, they have a network team, an identity team, an application team. And that context is lost between the user and the resource is lost in that end-to-end flow from the requester to the resource. So if you look at a couple of examples, let's say a user remotely working from home connects in through the VPN. From that, this could be an admin. and then he connects into a jump host. From that jump host, he logs into a database server to do an archive or a backup. So really, he's requesting access to that database to run certain commands on as an admin on the database, and that entire transaction, that entire activity passes through multiple domains, multiple silos. So finally, when the database server sees that request, it does not have any context of where the user is coming from. What is the role of the user? Is he allowed to do this? So that entire context is lost in translation across enterprise silos, and that's one big challenge. Second is the enterprise is heterogeneous. They have applications, people coming from anywhere. There are applications that run on Linux, on Windows, applications written in Java, .NET, many different applications, heterogeneous systems running in private cloud, public cloud. So you really need normalization or to be able to do this, to be able to implement an effective zero trust architecture. So those are, Giri, a couple of challenges that I see as enterprises try to get on this roadmap towards zero trust.
Right. So that leads to this question about, why is it so hard for zero trust to be implemented across the board? And some of these maybe you would have touched it. Could you please say some things about the discovery portions and the federations of federation of your data logs, and how it will help zero trust, and why it is so hard today?
Yeah. So I talk about a couple of challenges around the heterogeneous nature of the enterprise, the silos in the enterprise. There's also this challenge around zero trust requires continuous authentication and authorization. So you need continuous discovery, continuous monitoring. Now, with the trend towards the cloud, some of these resources are ephemeral. The VM or the container is not persistent. It lasts for minutes or sometimes even seconds. So you need continuous discovery. You can't push the policy ahead of time. You need to discover that this resource is coming up to fulfill a certain function at this particular time, and then dynamically be able to push that policy when a user or an application tries to access that resource. So continuous discovery is a big challenge. You can't, your CMDBs or your inventory systems sometimes have static catalogs. So you need a continuous discovery mechanism. Second is around, as we have talked to enterprises, they have thousands of applications. Identity is distributed across applications, distributed. There's no single store of identity, and identity is integral and essential to being able to implement zero trust. So yes, centralizing identity is a really hard challenge. So you need a federated implementation of zero trust, federated identity. And then the last thing I talked about, heterogeneous systems, legacy systems. How can we get systems that have been built since not just 2000s, even earlier than that, onto this roadmap? So these are all the challenges that have to be overcome. And sometimes I see that I think that enterprises starting now having greenfield deployments are in a much better position to implement get on the path of zero trust compared to the enterprises that have been around for a much longer time. So I think the new agile enterprises may even leapfrog the larger enterprises on the zero trust journey.
Hey, Anjan, you spoke about federated identity. Could you just help us understand, there's a lot of machine-to-machine connections happening today, right? There are a lot of RPAs running within the organizations, and I think human as an identity is still a big portion of things that we are trying to solve within the authentication and authorization. But add to this complexity, we have brought in a lot of machine-to-machine connections. So can you just touch upon that and how that is getting, that is making it still more harder?
Yeah, absolutely, Giri. That's a really good point. As we talk about zero trust, every entity is untrusted. And the entity is not just a user. We gravitate towards users. But as enterprises are on this, the transformation initiative and the automation initiative, a lot of the work that is being done by humans is completely automated. It's being replaced by scripts that run periodically. Your installations are happening through your CI/CD pipelines, through Ansible, through Puppet. So there's your operational tools, your APM tools, they run periodically. So the authentication and authorization, as the SolarWinds attack has shown, is not just restricted to users. It has to be done for every entity, and that entity is an application, it's a script, it's a machine account. And there are enterprises that told us there are tens of thousands of machine accounts, of service accounts in their enterprise. Some of these service accounts are shared accounts. They run every minute, far more often than users. Users may connect in and run a few commands. Your scripts are running every minute, every hour, every day. And so scaling is also is an integral part of how do you scale, how do you build a system that can monitor every application, every script, and do that authentication and authorization continuously. It clearly is a big challenge and it has to be solved as part of Zero Trust.
Thanks, Anjan. Mona Lisa, appreciate if you could run this poll for us.
Yes, I've launched the poll.
Thank you.
I will be closing the poll now. I have shared the poll.
Okay, great. So the question was around where is your organization in the Zero Trust journey? The poll is equally divided, 1/3 for each of these answers of ABC. Most of them have said, they have selected and deployed at least one Zero Trust. Equal number said they are evaluating Zero Trust, and an equal number of them said it's in the project strategy and planning phase. Great. So there's an equal importance that is given. Some are ahead in the journey of implementation, some are in the strategy and planning phase, and some are actually evaluating solutions. So Anjan, coming to this slide, we want to understand if the organization now, like there are a lot of audience who would like to understand where do they need to start their Zero Trust journey. Could you help them to understand which projects they should take up for first within the Zero Trust from a priority standpoint?
Sure, Giri. Looking at the poll, I smiled because today every vendor is positioning themselves as a Zero Trust vendor, and so there's a lot of confusion in the market on what is Zero Trust or not. I would urge all the participants here to really study the NIST 800-207 paper to say what is really Zero Trust. How do we build a policy decision point, a policy enforcement point, and be able to do this continuously, do this authentication and authorization continuously. Now, having said that, going back to your question, Giri, I would urge all enterprises, there's no one answer that will fit every enterprise. You really have to look at your situation as you create the roadmap to Zero Trust. And it depends on the vertical, it depends on the size of the enterprise. But there are clearly certain foundational components which should be the starting point for the Zero Trust initiative. You definitely need a data lake approach where you can centralize your identity, federate your identity. Now, Gartner recommends a couple of good entry cases for Zero Trust. One is microsegmentation, which is machine-to-machine authentication and authorization. And the second one is around ZTNA, which is Zero Trust Network Access, which is how do users onboard to the enterprise. I would recommend two other use cases, which also aligns up really well with Zero Trust, which is the lifecycle integrity of workloads. And what we mean by that is when you think about which will complement the workload segmentation or micro-segmentation. You have to think about the workload. What happens when you look at a workload in its entirety, a 360-degree view of the workload? There's provisioning, there's execution, there's operations and maintenance, and there are interactions on all these four quadrants through the life cycle of a workload. This is a very good use case to get started on Zero Trust. The second one is around, which we would recommend, or I would recommend, is entitlement management. Enterprises could have hundreds of applications, thousands of users, roles and privileges, and so there's a spaghetti of roles. And how do we do this entitlement management so users get just enough privileges just in time to access the resources that they want in the applications that they need access to? So these are all good use cases to get started with on the zero trust journey.
Hey, Anjan, when you speak about entitlement management, as you know, we've been speaking to a lot of customers who say they follow the RBAC methodology or the ABAC methodology, and but then when I speak from an audit standpoint, if I have to talk to customers having 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 users, and they have access to multiple applications, you know, at least every organization has about 15 priority applications that each one has access to. Now, combine that with segregation of duty issues. I mean, these are some of the things an IT auditor looks at. Segregation of duties, access privileges, least privilege, what accesses they have, when they do the access certifications and all that. So I have never been satisfied as an auditor that, you know, it is many organizations are in the check the box approach that the business has to do the certification and then they do the certification. So what do you recommend? What is the path they need to look at to make this a very effective, you know, set of compliance activity, or, you know, as an activity to ensure the hygiene is maintained within the organizational access and authorization list? So
Yeah.
what is some of the steps you would recommend to them?
Yeah. So you know, when you start out with an application, you can start out very cleanly. You may design roles, but then over time you have a proliferation of roles. There are so many exceptions that come about in an enterprise as it's you know, through the routine operations. And enterprises have told us they started with 300 roles, they have ended up with 3,000, if not 30,000 roles. So essentially, it has degenerated. Role-based access controls has degenerated to ABACs, whereas you are providing access control based on a user, based on a resource. So this problem cannot be solved just with configuration data. Configuration data has to be combined with activity data to be able to do this role optimization, role consolidation, access certification, segregation of duties. So that really lines up with the zero trust of continuous monitoring of what users are doing inside the application, what roles and privileges they have, and what resources they are getting access to. So entitlement management, I think, is really where the value of zero trust will completely be realized, so that you can do, as you talked about, Giri, the challenges around access certification, segregation of duties, simplifying role management can all be addressed. So yeah, combining continuous discovery, continuous monitoring of users, combine that with configuration of what is in your identity governance systems, bringing those two things together will solve this problem.
Great, thank you. So could you just help us to understand, see, as part of the zero trust, organizations are looking at solutions, and I'm sure the participants also would like to understand what they need to look at from an architecture standpoint, from a product standpoint. And since Prismo is positioned as a, you know, zero trust solution, could you please give some highlights on what you do within Prismo, and what are you doing to solve some of the complex problems that you know, the CISOs are facing today?
Yeah. So clearly, you know, we have switched over here to how Prismo has built something that lines up with NIST 800-207. So the central part of this of our architecture is a data lake, and the data lake is where all the information comes together to be that policy decision point. So the data lake has to be a federated data lake, so that an enterprise that has resources in Amazon, in their private data centers, users coming in from different geographies, campuses, working from anywhere. So you cannot centralize all this information. You need a federated, distributed policy decision point. So that is the first part of this architecture. The second, if you look at the policy enforcement point, clearly there are users and you have to discover and monitor users, but there are other parts which are your applications that are sitting in your private and public cloud in SaaS applications. So that really becomes the data plane, or from where telemetry information comes to the data lake, as well as commands from the data lake go back down to the enforcement points, so that you can authenticate and authorize subjects that are requesting access to resources. Now, the data lake also needs, then, for the decision point also gets context information. The context information is from enterprise internal context, and that context can come from, for users, comes from Active Directory. For your assets, servers, VMs, that comes from a CMDB like ServiceNow. There's internal context that comes from DNS, DHCP, and so on. So that's all internal context for the enterprise. There's also external context, threat intelligence information, vulnerability information, so that the policy decision point can make a contextual, correct policy just in time. So that's the entirety of what Prismo has built, but it completely mirrors the architecture that NIST has come out with towards the end of last year. We started on this project in 2016. We have been in production since end of 2019, but we have adhered to the zero trust principles of the PDP, the PEP, the separation between that, the bidirectional connection from the PEP to the PDP. So there's continuous telemetry, continuous discovery, and then continuous authentication and authorization that goes beyond a session all the way down to a single transaction.
Hey, Anjan, thanks for that. I mean, I would like to ask you a question around, you say your sensors or agents goes into the VMs or the containers only, and you don't put your agents on the on the user devices. But so how do you protect the endpoints?
Yeah. So in the zero trust architecture, one of the founding principles is that the user and the user device cannot be trusted. So that the trust is enforced from the target standpoint, from the standpoint of the resource that different entities are trying to get access to. So see, the target are completely in the control of the enterprise. The user devices are not in the control of the enterprise. You cannot monitor them 100% of the time. The user can very easily disable the sensor that's on their laptop, and then you've violated the principles of zero trust. So that is why in our implementation, we have done it from the standpoint of the target, the resources that the enterprise owns and can monitor that all the time, which is required for continuous discovery, continuous monitoring. These are the principles of zero trust. Anything that cannot be monitored all the time, you cannot be trusted, and so it has to be treated as untrusted.
Hey, thanks for that, Anjan. I'll just step into the use case that you want to speak of. We have very limited time. So if you could just quickly give us an overview of what exactly happened with SolarWinds, software supply chain attack, and if you can explain that to our participants, it will be helpful.
Sure. Maybe we can. The only point I want to make on this slide here is that the attack came from within the enterprise. That you trust certain vendors, you trust Microsoft, you trust Oracle, you trust your SolarWinds, and going forward, you cannot do that. Your repos, whether they are internal repos or external repos, cannot be trusted. In fact, I was in conversation with a customer yesterday who said that their repo is in the S3 bucket in Amazon, and that itself cannot be trusted. Their own internal repo cannot be trusted. So that's really the point here, which is that the attacks are coming from inside. It is your supply chain, your software updates, your patching. All of those are vectors for compromisation by a threat actor. Now, in the case of if you look at a supply chain, there are four major parts to this, four major points at which a compromise can occur. First is your repo, which may be your internal repo or an external repo from which you're getting your software. that itself can be compromised. In the case of SolarWinds, the enterprises trusted the DNS domains for SolarWinds. You're going to clearly allow SolarWinds to update itself by connecting to its domain. So that could not have been stopped. That is why you need continuous authentication and authorization. Even after you've gotten the update, you have to continuously monitor SolarWinds. The execution of SolarWinds, which is essentially a cron job that is running periodically to get the CPU, the memory, and the disk. It's not just about users. So once that DLL was updated and from a trusted source, the attacker was able to escalate privileges, was able to laterally move inside the enterprise, and then establish the command and control and exfiltrate data. In this case, you trusted SolarWinds, the enterprise trusted SolarWinds, it trusted the domain that SolarWinds got its update from, which really brings why you need the zero trust principle. Even after that sanctioned update came in, you have to continuously monitor the behavior and profile it.
Anshan, just to kind of clarify, it was reported that this particular threat actor was live in a lot of federal government, instances, and a lot of even within Microsoft and within large organizations for over 6 months. So do you think zero trust? What point here would you like to explain the zero trust concept that could have helped them to kind of identify this risk at an early stage and then mitigate it?
Yeah, so sometimes the software update can come from an untrusted domain, but in this case, steps 1 and 2 would not have been detected by the enterprise. But clearly, after that DLL update happened, steps 3 to 6 could have been detected and stopped by the enterprise. And clearly, you want to do this as close to infiltration as possible. So the ideal place where enterprises should have caught it was step 3, when lateral movement and escalation of privileges happen.
Okay, so how do you solve this in Prisma?
Well before exfiltration of data, which is the final step in the attack, which can happen 6 months later. It takes a long time for the attacker to be able to get from the initial entry point through a series of lateral movements and privilege escalations to get to the target system that they want to exfiltrate data from.
Right, great. So I was just asking you, do you have a solution for this kind of software supply chain attack within Prisma?
You know the answer to that, Giri. We absolutely do, and in fact, we are one of the vendors to catch to detect this at a customer network towards the end of last year, and we'll show you on the next slide how we actually did that. What Prismo does to be able to detect a software supply chain attack like this. So we essentially build a 6-dimensional fingerprint or a profile of every single entity inside the enterprise. It's not just the user. In the case of let's say a service account, the service account runs on the source. It periodically connects to a series of targets to run its task. So we build the DNA on the source, and what we mean by that is, what is that service account doing on the source? What are the targets that it connects to? What is it doing on the target? How periodically does the script run? Who is the enterprise service admin who is allowed to modify the script? So we build the 6-dimensional DNA of the supply chain, and through that we are able to see the behavioral changes that happens as part of an attack. By building a 6-dimensional DNA or a fingerprint, we eliminate false positives, and we have great confidence when we are able to detect a very complex attack, like an attack that comes from within the enterprise itself.
Great.
And so we are able to intervene at all of these steps, whether it's from all the steps from 1 to 6. We have built the controls. We have the provenance of every single executable, which repo is it coming from, and how many peers servers is the software going on to. The lateral movement happens through the detection of lateral movement happens through our chain of trust technology. We are able to trace the activity of service accounts or privileged accounts back to the enterprise user, and then be able to intervene at each of these stages from 1 to 6. So even if we miss a single step, the enterprise can be assured that we would have, through this continuous authentication and authorization at every step along the way, we are able to detect the threat at along the kill chain.
So what you're essentially saying is that, the organization should build their defense at each step or each step in the kill chain rather than waiting for the last step to happen, and then they have certain controls built in there, right?
Correct. And by tracking the entire kill chain, you are able to gain confidence in what you are detect, and you eliminate the chances that you'd have false positives because you're able to piece together the entire kill chain. And as part of Zero Trust, when you build a risk profile of an entity, once the risk profile exceeds that threshold, and it may be after 2 or 3 steps in the kill chain, you're able to take action. Not after step 8, but you're able to, and not after step 1, which might lead to false positives, but you've built enough confidence through steps 2 and 3 that you're able to take early action. So tracking the entire kill chain every step along the way is important to solve the problem of both false positives and false negatives.
So what's a good framework to use for evaluating these patterns and of the kill chain, the tactics and the techniques?
No doubt, MITRE is a really good framework. MITRE tactics and techniques have become the industry standard now, and it fits in really well with the Zero Trust initiatives that enterprises are undertaking.
Great. Okay. Mona Lisa, would you please be appreciative if you could bring up the poll question?
I have launched the third poll. I will be closing the poll now. I have shared the poll.
Thank you. So as the response goes, what are the primary benefits do you think about, within Zero Trust? Most of them have selected all the above, which means A, B, C, D, E that you would have seen. Yeah, it's great. So I think that shows that the knowledge of the participants that Zero Trust is at an enterprise level, and we need to look at it at an enterprise level rather than in a siloed way. So Anjan, thanks so much for giving a complete overview of what is Zero Trust and how Zero Trust can be implemented. What are some of the complexities involved in implementing Zero Trust? And as you said, Prismo is Zero Trust ready, and we would love to hear more about what Prismo does. And if you could just give a 2-minute overview on what you do apart from on the Zero Trust platform, what are some of the complex problems you're solving?
Yeah, so the supply chain attacks is one. You think about the modern attacks, which are denial of service attacks like ransomware. The technologies that people have been using for the last 10 years don't apply well because they've been detection and response technologies. Attacks like ransomware should really be stopped right as close to install as possible. It's futile to detect a ransomware attack after it has encrypted files. I'd say more and more attackers will go to denial of service attacks because denial of service attacks, the end goal is much easier to accomplish than exfiltration of data and then being able to sell the data on the dark web. So ransomware prevention of malware, even at install, even before it executes, is a big pain point. Entitlement management, the complexity of applications, roles, what users are doing inside the application, what data they are accessing. That's a very hard problem to solve, and I think we have done we have a really good solution around that as well. So here, these are 3 or 4 good use cases where around ransomware, around supply chain, entitlement management, where Prismo's platform can be a good fit. clearly we also do the things that Gartner recommends around micro-segmentation or identity-based network segmentation.
Great. So it's time for Q&A. I have one question from the participant. Let me just narrate that to you, Anjan. In BFSI sector, there is a digital transformation and moving to open banking, cognitive banking, and automation banking. In the context of Gartner recommendations, ZTNA, workload segmentation, workload lifecycle, and entitlement management, which approach you recommend for authentication and authorization, meeting regulatory compliance, and also maintaining segregation of duty between functions? I mean, he's
Right.
more. The question is more around the approach.
Right. So to solve this, and we are actually working, Giri, as you know, we're working on open banking, and so this to solve this problem, it really requires instrumentation of the application. And so what Prismo does in this case is it provides a library that customers include as part of their application, that instruments the application to be able to trace the code paths inside the application. As a result of that, we are able to discover users, roles, and resources inside the application. That is really the foundation of what is needed to solve this problem. And it goes, open banking is not just, there's a big importance on OWASP API security and vulnerabilities as part of this. So I think entitlement management and vulnerabilities in the application go hand in hand. This problem cannot be solved at the network layer or through an API gateway or a web application firewall. It really requires you to instrument the application to have visibility into the APIs, and that's really how we have approached and solved this problem.
Great. Thanks, Anjan. So I think we are run out of time. Mona Lisa, is there any other questions from the participants?
If anybody has any questions, I would request them to write it in the questions tab, please.
I think we are good.
Yes, I think there are no questions.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Anjan. Thank you, Mr. Giridhar, for the webinar. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to write to these email IDs that are popped up now, anjan@prismosystems.com. You can write to Anjan directly if you have some queries around Zero Trust, and we'll be happy to answer. Thank you. Thank you, Anjan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks, participants,
you.
for being. Thank you.